Waterfowler 41 son, and today we're going to be replacing the differential oil, and while we're at it, we're going to install a new differential cover. Let's get into it.
All right, so like my son said, we're going to be replacing the differential cover as well as the oil. I already had to do the oil, and I figured while we're at it, let's just go ahead and throw a new cover on there because the new aftermarket covers do give you a few more benefits. They give you fill plugs as well as a drain plug. The factory differential cover doesn't have that, so you have to pull the whole cover off. So while we're at it, obviously we're just going to replace everything. Now I'm going with the Spicer cover. This is actually the same cover as the Ford Performance one. It's just got a different name on it, and it's half the price of the Ford Performance one. So I'll leave a link to this guy down in the description, but if you like the Ford Performance stuff, I'll obviously drop that down in the description as well. While we are installing the cover, we're also going to install a new LubeLocker gasket. So the cover does come with a gasket, but I've heard bad things, or you can do better with the gasket. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be installing the LubeLocker gasket. It's much better than the one that comes with the Spicer kit. And then also, while we're on the topic, it does also come with hardware, but the same thing, I heard that the factory hardware is actually better than the Spicer hardware. So we're going to see what sort of condition factory hardware is in, and then if it's in good condition still, we're just going to go ahead and run with that one and use that with the cover here. But let's get up underneath the truck and I'll show you how to drain the differential fluid. All right, so we are up underneath the truck. Here's our rear differential. Got some light on the situation. Before we can start backing off the bolts on the outside of the differential, we're going to need to get a 10mm wrench up on top of this little silver bracket here. There is a bolt that goes right through the middle of that bracket into the top of the differential housing, and that's what's holding that bracket in place. With that bracket in place, we're not able to remove that top bolt here, and we won't be able to get the cover completely off. So 10mm, get that guy off, and then what we'll do is we'll take a 1/2 inch socket once we get our drain pan up underneath the differential here and start backing off on all these screws and bolts. Now, the important thing to know when you're replacing your differential fluid is you want to make sure your truck is parked on flat, a level surface, because you want to make sure that that fluid is sitting where it needs to be so that when you go back in to fill with the new fluid, you're filling it up to the appropriate height. So I believe the fluid's probably about here, but if the truck was up on ramps, that fluid would actually be a different level and it wouldn't give you the right fill level here on your differential. All right, so we have that 10mm bolt removed. It stays with that bracket, and that bracket just basically slides to the rear of the vehicle and then up off that threaded rod there. It doesn't pop completely out of the way, so we may end up using a 1/2 inch wrench to get access to that guy, but a socket is going to be good on all these other ones. So let's go ahead and get all these other ones loosened up. Make sure you leave a few of them installed, particularly at the top, because at some point in time this thing's going to pop open, it's going to start draining fluid, and we don't want the cover to come tumbling down with it. So I usually leave 1 or 2 up at the top. But let's get that differential cover removed, or draining. We'll show you what it looks like that way, and then we'll talk through next steps here. All right, so it didn't even have to pry on the differential pan all that much, and the oil's already coming out slowly, so be careful. One of the rules of thumb here with when I do these things is I try to get all the hard to reach bolts first, because I don't want to be reaching at those things and trying to muscle around with those while the oil's leaking on me, and then work your way through the easy ones. Like I said, leave a few in there so that you have kind of a controlled exit of the oil, because the last thing you want is for that whole cover to come dropping down on you, spilling oil everywhere, and this stuff smells like crap and you don't want to smell like it. So anyway, let me finish with getting all these bolts off here. It's just a variety of 1/2 inch sockets. I'd use shallow ones up on top as well as a 1/2 inch ratcheting wrench just to get access, because it is a little tight up by that track bar, but the ones on the bottom and the sides obviously are pretty easy. But let's finish up with getting this pan off. We'll take a look at the mating surface between the differential cover and the differential itself, see how much cleaning we got to do, and then we could work on reinstalling our new Spicer cover. All right, so I got our old differential cover off here. We got our old seal here as well. The seal's looking a little beat up, and I will say, if we look in there at the differential, you see right around the housing itself, it's a little messy, so we got to clean that up with a wire wheel and a razor blade. Here is the Spicer housing. Basically the same geometry. Again, the big advantage of going with the new differential cover in most cases is you get fill plugs and then you get drain plugs. Factory doesn't have that, so obviously the whole thing has to come off and then you fill through the front of the differential. Whereas with the aftermarket ones here, with this Spicer one from Dana, no longer have to do that. So anyway, let's go ahead and clean up the seal on the differential so we get a nice mating surface, get our LubeLocker seal out of the case, put this guy on here, and then go ahead and reinstall everything, and then we could pump the differential fluid into the housing. All right, so we have our differential housing cleaned up as best as I can get it. I basically used a wire brush as well as a straight edge or a razor blade and just kind of moved it along, and it's a nice smooth surface even though it's slightly discolored. it will work for our purposes here. So now we got our Spicer cover, and then we got our LubeLocker gasket. Make sure you have an idea of the orientation of the gasket. Sometimes these things are a little goofy, but on the 9 3/4 rear diff for Fords, it really is, I think, symmetrical from this side and down. So I don't think you could really do it the wrong way. Let's see here. Yeah, see, so you can. So make sure you do it the right way. So I have it upside down now, and you can see some of the holes line up, but not all of them do. Whereas the other way, all the holes line up this way. So make sure you know which way it's going before you get underneath the truck. It's kind of a pain in the butt to reverse this. But what we're going to do, so this is the top of the differential. We're going to try to get a bolt in one of these top holes first, and then just kind of slowly work our way down around the differential. And then I'll show you the tightening pattern that I typically use. We'll go ahead and fill this guy, and then we'll call this project done. All right, so we have the differential loosely put into place here. Now, when I tighten differentials, typically what I do is I just go on one ball on one side, and then I go to the opposite side. And I basically do it like you would tighten lug nuts on wheels. Anything round like this, I think that's the best way. That way you get a nice even tightness, and it basically centers that gasket as you're tightening everything down. And I believe it's 30 foot-pounds, but I will leave the correct foot-pounds as far as what you need to do with these bolts in the description below. But let's go ahead and tighten these guys up, torque them down, and then I'll show you how to fill this cover, and we'll call this one a day. All right, so we have our differential fully installed and everything tightened down. Now what you'll see is a bunch of little red marks around all of the screws. Those are called witness marks, and I actually got in the habit of doing that when I was doing the brakes in the last video, but it's a good quick indicator to make sure that the bolts that you are installing are staying tight. So after you torque them down, then you just go ahead and mark them all with a red or some sort of colored paint marker. That way you know if you look at them and you don't see that line on the bolt lining up with the line on the housing, then you know things are backing off and you got to retorque things. So now the last thing we got to do is fill in the differential with our oil. So you notice that I have both plugs removed. If you have a lifted truck where the differential is pitched backwards, you're going to fill up until the top hole here. So you're going to fill until the oil starts leaking out. If you have a stock truck or a Raptor like mine, you're going to fill until the oil comes out of the bottom hole. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to fill from the top hole, and then we're going to monitor, and when the fluid starts to come out and drip out of this bottom hole, then we know we have adequate leveling, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten everything down. So torque these guys down to the same as these, which is about 30 foot-pounds. Make sure before you do anything, you do tighten down the drain plug here. This does come loose. All right, so we were filling up. I was on the 4th bottle or 4th quart of gear oil, and then the oil started coming out. So what I'm gonna do now is stop pumping. I'm gonna let this drain, and then we'll wipe up the excess, put our caps on, and then we are good to go. We take it for a test drive. But again, you want to pump up just until the oil starts coming out that bottom hole for stock ride height trucks. If you're lifted, you need to consider filling up the top one. The only reason you see the oil tube here into the top one is it's just cleaner to fill here, and then watch that hole. All right, so got the oil filled to the lower bottom, or the bottom of the lower fill hole there. Got the plugs put in there, tightened them up to about 20, 30 foot-pounds, just basically hand tight. And then I went a few more turns, did the same thing for the plug at the bottom for the drain. We are good to go. Don't forget to tighten down that 10mm bolt at the top for the brake lines that holds them to the top of the differential. You had to remove that to get the top bolt off. But now that everything is installed, we're going to go take the truck for a test drive and just make sure that everything is working as it should. But that is how you replace your differential oil as well as install a new differential cover. So the steps in this video will be the same for pretty much any cover you install on your truck. One thing I would suggest is if you are going to go with an aftermarket cover, make sure that it does have the fill plugs and a drain plug. There's no sense in getting an aftermarket cover if it doesn't have any of those. And I've seen a handful of them on the market, some of the billet ones that don't have any plugs. And to me, that's just not worth it. So Spicer, this thing was about $160 plus the oil, about $20 a quart. So really not that bad of a product. And then the LubeLocker gasket was about $25, $30, I believe, on Amazon. But I'll leave a link to all the stuff down in the description below. But thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it. This is a quick one. Should be able to knock it out in 30 minutes. You guys have a good one. Bye.